all the moms are like, oh no, Torsten's teaching. Cover the ears. I promise no F-bombs in this sermon. I make a pledge. That said, if that thing falls on me because of an earthquake, that pledge is off. But I do hope you understood the reason why I shared that, that there's something far more vulgar than vulgar language to God, and that is having a heart that gives excuse to despising somebody else's humanity. And because what we're doing is we're ultimately despising that God has stamped his image in them, right? And we don't want to do that. We don't want to be those kind of people. I brought my phone today as my Bible because normally I use the New King James. And as I was reading through this, because we tend to use the ESV here in this church, as I was reading through this, I noticed a lot of things in the list were different, or they used different words. And instead of just trying to explain it and all that kind of stuff, or try to do the balancing act between the different words, I thought I'd just use this, the ESV. And so, since I don't own an ESV, and those Bibles, I tried looking at the script on those things, and the pages are so thin, and you kind of see the word and the word on the back page. Got kind of tough, so I just decided I'd use my phone. So if I'm using my phone, I'm not like checking scores or anything. I can guarantee you that. Although there's a game I'm interested in right now, but I won't do that. All right, so let's start with a little bit of a word of prayer and hope that God just blesses us, and he's so good. He's so full of love for us, and let's just enjoy his presence here, right? Lord, thank you so much for this time together, and open your word to us. Open our hearts to receive your word and hear your word, and for you to speak to each one of us individually. You have such a deep love for us. And you care for us to have a deep love for others. And so I pray you'd use this time for us to grow in that and grow in just being more authentic about who we are in you. Not to beat ourselves up. We're human beings. We live in a fallen world. And there's a lot of hurting people, those who know you and those who don't in this world. And what we need more than anything is just encouragement so that we can go out and be encouragers. We need comfort so we can go out and be comforters. And if we can't get that from you, then we can't give it either. So I pray you'd bless us in this time. In Jesus' name, amen. So today it's about the qualifications for elders and for deacons. It's interesting. It gives the first about 7 verses for elders, and then it gives the next few verses for deacons before he kind of goes into ends the chapter in a praise. If you had gotten Torsten 20 years ago, when he first started getting into ministry, or 30 years ago already, probably almost, I probably would have taught this a little different. I would have looked at, well, what are elders? What are deacons? How are they different? I would have gotten really in the thick weeds and the thickness of that kind of stuff, and then some of the things that the elder qualifications that seem to be here for an elder are a little bit different for a deacon, and it's like, well, why is that important for the elder and not for the deacon? And why is this one for some of them have overlap and all that kind of stuff? I don't want to be like that. That's not the kind of, I don't think God's that way, because I think at the end of the day, we're all leaders. Even if we're not leaders in the ministry, this qualifications are really qualifications that we're all supposed to have anyways, right? These are the qualifications we're supposed to have just as people who love God and are loved by God. Now, I think it is important that those who are in leadership embody these qualities, but you can have these qualities and still not be the right person. You can do the right things and still not be the right person. If you remember Matthew chapter 6 in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus kind of cuts loose on the Pharisees because he says you pray a lot and you fast a lot and you give your tithe and your alms. Those are all great things. There's nothing wrong with that. Praying a lot is a good thing, right? Giving tithing is a good thing. You can do all these things and still be the wrong person. Fasting is a good thing. I just don't do it because I think food's a lot more fun. But for those who like to fast, praise God, man, do it. I love my food, but it's a good thing, right? And yet you can do that, and like we see as Jesus tears apart the Pharisees for the attitude, because it's not that they were doing the wrong thing. They were doing the right thing, but they were doing it out of the wrong person. The why behind the what is so important. We need to know what's my why behind my what. And so for the same reason, as we look at these qualifications for an elder, we can see, as we go down through this list, we can see what they're supposed to do. You can do these things and still be the wrong person. I don't know how many of you guys ever watch TED Talks or any of the podcasts with Simon Sinek. The guy is pretty interesting to watch. You can learn a lot from the guy. And one of the things he says is there's a lot of leaders who are not managers, and there's a lot of managers who are not leaders. In other words, there's people who have the title and the management position, and yet they don't have the qualifications of the leader. And there's a lot of people who have the qualifications for the leader and do not have the title of management, but they do it anyways without the title. Right? And it's very important that even though these are qualifications for an elder, they're really qualifications just for all of us as believers. And what I most specifically want to point out is, if you know me, I love to talk about the most important thing for us to do is be about God's love, right? About loving people. That is the number one. We can keep the commandments, but I found this quote. Where did I have that quote? Come back, quote. There you are. Don't live with the never-ending burden of keeping God's laws, but rather with the privilege of loving and caring people. For that is the fulfillment of the law. Right? And so as we go through these qualifications, I hope that I can show you that these qualifications really are just ways of loving people. And that's what we're called to do, right? So let's get into the thickness of the thickness here in the weeds and read through this. This is a trustworthy, verse 1, this is a trustworthy saying. Oh, come on. If anyone aspires to be the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Now it's interesting, overseer here, one translation says it's elder, another translation says it's overseer here, and then another translation says bishop, right? So in our modern vernacular, an elder at a church versus a bishop, that's kind of a regional overseer of a whole denomination or a whole kind of the Catholic Church. These are all different things. So what do these things exactly mean? I think everybody has their own interpretation of it. It's not important. The main thing is a leader, right? Later on we'll talk about the deacons. They're more like the servant leaders. But again, I want us to look that we all carry these qualifications, even if we never hold a title. Because, why? Well, number one, we're all called to be ambassadors, right? If we love Christ, we're called in 1 Corinthians to be ambassadors, right? That's a leadership position. In Revelation chapter 1, verse 6, it says that we're called to be kings and priests. Those are leadership positions. And thirdly, whenever we take the time to care for people, just to love on people, to encourage people, you're being a leader in just that. Why do I say that? Because in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 7, it says, the greater blesses the lesser. So when we take time to bless people with kindness, bless people with goodness, we are, by nature of what we are doing, we are in the position of being the greater. That is in of itself a leadership position. And it's a beautiful thing that God would bestow that upon us. Again, let's not get wrapped up. When we read a lot of Paul's letters and a lot of things where he tells us how we're supposed to live our life, how we're supposed to live our lives, do not think of that as a burden of some kind of Christian thing that we have to be, but rather enjoy the privilege that we get to love people, because that's all that is. And then it doesn't become this burden that I'm not doing it very well. It becomes a privilege that I get to do it, okay? So verse 2. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach. And again, as we go through this, I want more than anything, I just want to show you how these are aspects of love. If we do this right, these are aspects of love. An overseer should be above reproach, the husband of one wife. This doesn't mean single people can't be elders, by the way. This just means an elder can't be practicing polygamy. And if you stop and think about that, polygamy is everything but loving to your wife, right? Right? And so, and then it says sober-minded. He needs to be sober-minded. in one of the I think in the Message, the translation for there was he needs to be cool, calm, and collected. A person that's just kind of, when everything else is falling apart around people, when people are in our country right now where it's so politically divisive that you can't even have a good conversation, that we can be the cool, calm, and collected person that can just say, you know, the other side might have a point. Maybe we just need to listen. Let's hear their story and see what they say, what they mean. Maybe what they mean by blank, blank, blank is different than we're prescribing a word to them or a message to them of what they mean by that, or an intuition that they don't actually mean, right? And being cool, calm, and collected, being sober-minded, having a little humility. These are all attributes of being a loving person, right? That we take the time to understand what the other person might mean by that. Self-controlled. Nothing more unloving than a guy that's out of control and flying off the handle, and especially in the car, road rage. I'm good at that. I can fly off the, and then that's my profession, right? Driving. So I shouldn't do that, but most part, God's pretty good about that. Respectable, again, hospitable. You know, hospitable. There's probably no practice, more pragmatic, practical application of being a loving, kind person than being hospitable. Opening your home, opening your life, making somebody feel at ease and welcome. That is caring. That is kind. That is encouraging. Able to teach. Again, I know one of the things, Jamie as an elder doesn't like to teach because the great joke of, people fall asleep at other people's sermons. Jamie fell asleep at his own sermon while he was preaching. I love that story. He will be the first one to tell you he's not able to teach here. But you know what? We can always be teaching each other just by sharing our heart and opening up our heart and showing what God's doing in our own lives. We're teaching. The progress that we're making is teaching. Not to be a drunkard. Yeah, I think of the story of Ronald Reagan when he came home one day at age 11 and he found his father drunk in the snow on the front yard. You know, being a drunkard usually doesn't lead to being a loving person. A lot of damage in families and lives because people drink too much, drink to excess. I'm not against alcohol. I don't drink really all that much myself. Occasionally I'll have a gin and tonic, but I found that just makes me put on weight, so I stopped. And I'm always trying to take off weight. But the embarrassment and the humiliation that's caused many families because one of the family members couldn't keep from the bottle or from the drugs. A lot of broken lives and a lot of testimonies I've heard over the years when I was a pastor of the damage it's done in their lives that people are still trying to recover from, right? It's not a loving thing. And so, man, if God can help us be free of that. Not violent, but gentle. Gentle is actually one of the descriptions of love, and right? Violent, obviously, is exactly the opposite. Not somebody who's quarrelsome, not somebody who wants to argue a lot and always has to be right and is opinionated. I don't know if you remember when I taught on the golden calf in Exodus, but I said, a great example of a golden calf that we all have today is being opinionated. It's being stubborn about your opinions, being stubborn about my opinions. I struggle with that all the time. I got a great opinion about something, usually politicians or politics or what's right or what's wrong. And then I'm stubborn about that. That's what becomes opinionated. And what does the Bible say? And I think 1 Samuel chapter 15, is that right? Right around verse 25, it says, if anybody, that stubbornness is like the sin of idolatry. Right? So when we're opinionated and stubborn about our opinions, we become quarrelsome. We have to be right. We have to prove people we're right. We have to put other people down and make them feel bad about themselves. Is that loving? Is that kind? Is that encouraging? Is that caring? Absolutely not. And so these qualifications that we go through and we see, they're just acts of being loving. Not a lover of money. Well, a lover of money, to be really honest with you, is a person that will definitely put something over someone, and they gladly, for the sake of getting richer and having their conveniences, don't mind walking over people, stepping on people. Right? That's not, we're supposed to be lover of people, not lover of things, not lover of money. But that's a trap, man. I know that for myself. He must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. Now, this seems kind of harsh, but again, I view this verse a lot different, having been a father of teenagers and learning this one lesson. The mistake that I made as a parent was that I put, early on in my parenting with my kids, I put where I think they needed to get to over enjoying who they were. I regret that immensely. And when the Bible says, raise a child in the way he should go, and he will not return to it, he will not depart, or he will return to it once if he departs. You know what I think about that is, it's not about, teach his kid not to swear. Torsten, you're going to teach a kid not to swear, right? Teach a kid not to, he's got to tithe, he's got to go to church, he's got to live right, he's no drinking, no drugs, all that kind of stuff. You know what I found out is if you teach the kid that they are loved and that they are valuable and that they are worth everything to God, not because of what they do, but strictly because they have the image of God stamped in them and he cares about them, irregardless. If you teach people that they are worthy to be loved, they will return to that. And that's so important that we teach our kids that. That's how we manage our house well. That's how we get our children to want to submit. They want to submit to encouragement. People want to submit to being cared for. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? So true. That was one of the lessons God taught me. That's actually one of the lessons that got me out of ministry, was when God began to show me that I was trying to be this loving pastor, but my wife was dying 1,000 deaths next to me because I wasn't loving her. And God showed me, if you can't love the person I put next to you, you can't leapfrog her and love everybody else. Right? That is what God... See, I think we have this thing. This is one of the things I was just realizing. Good leaders, they put people first. They do what they're doing for people. I just read about a guy, because of the tariffs from China that are happening, his company is suing the Trump administration because it's going to put their company out of business. He's got only about 500 employees. They import all these toys from China. He has something like 500 products. And for him to be able to open all of something like that on a flip of a coin, a factory in America or somewhere else, to do all those products, he says he has no chance, right? And the one thing is, he said he will not fire his employees. He will figure a way to take his own money and lose his own money before he takes it from them, because if they're working for him, they're part of his family. He said, we made it through COVID. We didn't think we were going to do it, but we made sure that the people knew that they were cared for. They were part of the family. They weren't just numbers that we needed to cut bottom line and cut people. We're going to take care of these people. Again, if you ever watch Simon Sinek kind of podcast, that's one of the first things he'll tell you is good leaders put people first. Bad leaders, they put agenda first, or they put their company first, or they try to put their nation first. They try to put the job first. Heard about one person that wants to do great things for humanity, but he doesn't actually care about humans. That was the subject about that person. That was the commentary about that person. That's a bad leader. A good leader cares about people and each individual person. That's how Jesus was. Jesus cared about each individual. He cares about you today, right now, where you're at, with whatever burden you're carrying. Okay, so, wait, where are we here? Qualifications of it, okay. Verse 6, he must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into condemnation of the devil. This is so true, by the way, guys. Time is the ultimate testing factor if a person really has the ability to endure. reaching setbacks, falling setbacks, coming through it, not getting bitter, not getting angry. I can remember when I was first trying to come up the ranks, and I was really excited, and I felt God had called me to Germany, and I was excited to go to Germany, and and I'd let that know to Pastor Wayne that, hey, man, I'm here for you. Whenever you want to plant a church in Germany, I'm ready. And he just goes, hey, that's great, man, and turned off and walked away, right? And I was like, well, I'm here, right? And then later on, he called me to be part of this Bible study group, and then he called a leader of the Bible study group. I thought for sure that would be me because I'm super spiritual. And he said, no, we got somebody else, man. But praise the Lord, that's great. And I'm like, dang. And I just got so angry and bitter at him for him not recognizing how gloriously spiritual I am. Like, what's wrong with him? It's important that we learn the endurance of humility, the endurance of seeing the long-term goal and seeing what's really in us to become a good leader. But again, remember, this is for all of us. Moreover, verse 7, he must be well thought of by outsiders so that he may not fall into grace, into the snare of the devil. Now, I'm going to get back to this one. We'll close with this verse. I want to come back to this one. Deacons, likewise, must be dignified and not double-tongued. So these would, I guess, be ushers or people that are helping out in the ministry. Again, I don't want to put labels on it because I don't think one is more valuable or less valuable, right? But don't be a liar. I think that, by the way, it doesn't say that for the elders. It seems so you'd think elders can lie. No, we know from the scriptures we shouldn't be lying. That's the language of the devil. It's not loving. It's not caring. It's not kind. It's not compassionate. So let's leave that. Shouldn't be addicted to much wine, so he shouldn't be also drunkard. Shouldn't be greedy for dishonest gain. In other words, another way of saying he shouldn't be a lover of money. He should hold on to the mystery of faith with a clear conscience. I like that. I like that. Don't be conceited about what we know about the Bible. Don't use the Bible or verses in the Bible as a chance to humiliate or shame others. That's not kind. I've done that. I've been guilty of that as a pastor. Looking down at people because they didn't know the verse or giving them a little Bible study pep talk that showed that I was better than them. That's not loving. That's not kind. That's not caring for people. I don't want to be that kind of person. Right? And of course, we all have our days where we're like that, and same thing with elders or deacons. Sometimes God calls people, they're not ready for it, but God has called it because he's going to make them ready for it through their failures. And that's okay. We as congregants can give them grace as they're learning, right? It was kind of fun to watch Noah when he was here. He made some mistakes, but he was such a great heart, had such a beautiful spirit, and it was fun. That's how they're going to grow. Let them also be tested first. Again, testing and time. If they prove themselves blameless, their wives should likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husband of one wife, also no polygamy there. Managing their children, their household well. Love your kids, man. Love your wife, love your kids. Same thing. Be kind to them. Be encouraging to them. Build them up. Let them know that they have a place that no matter what they do, what mistakes they make out there, they have a place where they can come home. They can be corrected. We can talk about it, but you will not lose your status of being loved in this house based on what you do or do not do, right? And that same thing goes for us as a church. I have a very good friend who struggles with homosexuality. He loves God, but he struggles with homosexuality. And he feels that he doesn't have a place in church where he won't be judged for that. And I have no problem telling him, I love you. I have no problem giving him a hug and saying, man, if you falter in gay porn or if you falter even in whatever else, you can come back to me and I will love you and care for you. Right? That is what we want to be about in the family of God, right? We've got a place where we're safe. And that doesn't mean that's not sin. That doesn't mean we don't deal with sin. But we realize that people are so important and that through God's encouragement and God's kindness, that when somebody fails, they have a place to come back to receive forgiveness, to receive love, to be set up on the way. And if they fail 7 times 70, they're going to be loved again. Right? We're going to care for them. All right. For those who serve well as deacons, they gain a good standing for themselves and also great confidence and faith. So, that's the beauty about serving, is if we serve well, we'll grow. All right, so then he gets into the verse 14. I hope to come to you soon, but I'm writing these things that if I'm delayed, you know how you ought to behave in the household of God. We're going to see in chapter 4 and 5, he really talks, well, even the chapters before that, he really teaches Timothy. Now, Timothy's the pastor of the church in Ephesus. He teaches Timothy how to, and Andrew will get into that next week. But he'll spend more time teaching him how to behave as a pastor. Don't let anybody look down on his youth. Cool thing. In fact, if you can, just turn real quickly to chapter 4, verse. I think it's verse 12 or 13. I'm sorry, I'm still in Andy's thunder here, but I want to say this. Verse 15 it is. He says, practice these things. Again, Andrew will teach next week what things he's supposed to practice. These are for all of us to practice, by the way, not just Timothy. He goes, immerse yourself in them so that, and this goes for elders, this goes for deacons, as well as for pastors, as well as for every one of us. The greatest witness you and I have is this, so that all may see your progress. Have you been progressing? Have I been progressing? One of the great things is when somebody comes up to me and says, man, you've really grown. You're different. You're not the same person. I remember you when you were, you're kind of, a little legalistic, a little gung-ho, a little zealous. You're so much more caring. That is beautiful. That's what it's about, right? That people see our progress as believers, that we weren't who we once were. And a great indicator of that is, when's the last time you disagreed with yourself? When's the last time that you said, I used to think this way. I don't think I think that way anymore. I've started meeting people who are outside of my normal realm, my normal tribe, who love God, but they don't see things the way I do. And at first I thought they were totally wrong, but as I'm getting to watch them pray and watch them love God, I'm thinking, you can't be wrong and love God like they love. Maybe I need to check. Maybe I need to have some checks and balances. Maybe I need to grow. Maybe I could rethink some things. That was the big thing about the Pharisees. You know how I like to say that I think it's very good for us to read the Gospels from the perspective of, maybe I'm the Pharisee. It's amazing. It'll open up scriptures to you like you've never seen before. When we do that, we begin to say, well, maybe there's things I need to think about and change, and maybe I'm not right in this. Okay, so back in chapter 3, great indeed, in verse 16 is indeed we confess is the mystery of godliness, and then he kind of goes into a praise of the gospel here. He was manifested in the flesh, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed in the world, and taken up in glory. Typical Paul, he gets kind of excited and just takes off and runs on something about how great Jesus is, right? I love it. That is a person that is so excited about the love of Jesus. Paul was the same guy, and he'll say this later in 2 Timothy, who says, I'm the chief of all sinners, right? Here's the guy that wrote most of the New Testament. He says, I'm the chief of all sinners. Why would he say that? Because he knows himself, and he knows, I'm just a guy. I'm a guy that's on, remember last time I preached about being on the spectrum of we can easily despise without even knowing about or disdain somebody else's humanity. He's like, yeah, I could be on the spectrum. Let's go back to verse 7, and we'll close with this. I know it's getting kind of late here. Children's ministry is like, get over. Start hearing the broomsticks on the ceiling. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders. I just want to share a story that just happened to me recently at work. I was walking by. We have this lady who's a lesbian at work. And she was talking to this guy, and she goes, and she's pointing to me as I was walking by. She goes, that guy is the most encouraging man in all of Metro. And I can tell you, the irony didn't pass on me. When have you ever heard a lesbian say about a white Christian male, that's the most encouraging person? Right? When does that ever happen? Now, there's a backstory. Some of you guys know it. When I first started working at Metro, she's this little short gal, sweetheart. But She's got tattoos all over her body. She dresses like a guy. She acts like a guy. She swears like a sailor or a truck driver. So do you, Torsten. And then the way she talked about women is like, man, that's even disrespectful for a guy. She would sit there and talk about women. I'm like, holy smokes, lady, you shouldn't be doing that, right? And I was just turned off by her, totally disgusted by her. And then one day, I'm walking by her grabbing some paperwork I needed to grab, and I'm hearing her tell somebody else that when somebody in a wheelchair gets on the bus, usually what happens is the wheelchair, and it'll be raining or something like that, and the wheelchair will come up to the front of the bus. Everybody will storm on the bus in front of that person, and they'll have to wait till everybody gets on the bus, especially trying to get up to Harborview, going up the hill. Everybody trying, and they're the last one sitting in the rain all wet, and you know, come on, and then to my shame, my attitude was always, oh man, now I'm going to be late because the wheelchair, and I would treat them that way, right? And she said, no. She wasn't telling this to me. She was telling this to somebody else. And I'm just listening to her. I make sure everybody waits outside until I get the wheelchair on the bus first. They deserve to come on first. And God spoke to my heart and said, she's a better person than you. All the judgmental I had made up in my mind about her and her disgusting, lifestyle, and God spoke to my heart and said, she's a better person than you. And so I started doing what she did. First of all, I felt better about myself, honestly. Second of all, nobody actually cared. They all respected that. And actually, thirdly, I got faster to where I was going because then I had more room to load up the wheelchair, and then the people would usually get on the back door or whatever, and it actually got me faster to my goal. And so a few months later, I came up to her and I told her that. I said, I just want to thank you so much because you've made me a better person. You've made me a better human being. And she was floored by that. She didn't know I was a Christian at the time. She said, I wish my mother would be here to be able to hear that I didn't do something wrong in my life. I just validated her humanity, her importance. And I've ever since then, every Christmas and every Thanksgiving, I text her and just say, I'm so grateful for who you are and your place in my life. See, God cares about these people. Whatever lifestyle they're trapped in, he doesn't see that as much as he sees the hurt and the pain that he wants to heal. That's what he cares about. We all have it. We know. Let's not kid ourselves. All of us have a backstory. All of us have a history. Some of it's with parents who are in the church. It made it worse for our lives, and we're still trying to get over that. Growing up in a Christian family. We've all got a backstory. We've all got hurt and pain. We just want somebody to validate us to say, it's okay, you're loved. And I did that for this girl. Now, like I say, she first did it for me because I wasn't there. I wasn't ready. So it's not like, yay, Torsten's such a great guy. God actually used her to show me first, right? Anyways, these qualifications for an elder, these qualifications for a deacon, yeah, we want to see our elders and deacons have them. We also know there's seasons in lives that elders and deacons are dry and empty and broken. They're just going through the motions. Pastors. Because why? We're all human. We're just human. We're just trying to make it through this thing called life. And by the grace of God, we do because he loves us so much. And so if we can just love each other, even the people who are supposed to be better, if we can just love them for who they are and say, hey, man, you're still good. It's amazing the effects that has on us. So can we be a church like that, just committed to that? I would love that. I would love for this to be a place where we're texting each other, where we're coming up, hugging each other. Man, how you doing? You are loved, man. Hey, if God puts that somebody on your heart, not only in this church, but a friend maybe, hey, text that person up and say, hey, let's get together for coffee. Or if they're living in another state, you are loved, man. You are the best. It's amazing what a little bit of encouragement will do, as this gal showed, what a little bit of encouragement will do to somebody. Man, you're the most encouraging person in all of Metro or all of Seattle or all of whatever, right? Let's try to strive to be those people, man. God has got so much love for us. All right, we're going to have communion. You're going to do it, right? So I'll let you finish up the prayer.